Hey everyone, Basecamp cohort, thank you for all of those who are on time as well as who are putting on their cameras. We really appreciate it. We will get started soon. We'll go live. We're back with Medusa and Graham. Very excited to get this going. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and Medusa or Madison will call on you. Talking to me? All right, I guess you can do your countdown. Oh, all right, amazing. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday Talks with the Google Student Developer Club. My name is Naveed, and we are part of the DMZ team. The DMZ is a world-leading accelerator for tech startups in Canada. We help startups build great businesses by connecting them with customers, capital, experts, and a community of entrepreneurs and influencers. For us, this means creating an environment where you can focus on scaling your business, and we help with the rest. Today's program is in partnership with DMZ Basecamp. DMZ Basecamp is an intensive student incubation program that helps young entrepreneurs create tech solutions to growing social or economic gaps in society over the course of 8 weeks in the summer. In this award-winning summer program, students tap into their potential and learn how to develop and market business ideas with the help of young entrepreneurs, industry mentors, and successful entrepreneurs. This is an opportunity for students to start real companies and gain experience learning opportunities to apply what they've learned to solve the world's biggest problems. Today, we are joined again with Medusa. Medusa works at Google Developers Clubs and currently works as a tech consultant specializing in digital media. Before working for Google, Medusa worked as the director of the Waterloo chapter of the Founder Institute. Developer student clubs are university-based student community groups for students interested in Google developer technologies. Students from all undergraduate or graduate programs with an interest in growing as a developer are welcome. By joining a DSC, students grow their knowledge in a peer-to-peer learning environment and build solutions for local businesses and their community. It is my pleasure to introduce Medusa.
Thank you, Navi. Awesome. Could everybody mute their speakers, please? I think there was a little bit of noise. Okay, so we're super excited to be here today. Quick overview as to why me and what got me here. So add a little bit more context to what Naveed introduced. I did work with about 2,500 entrepreneurs from coast to coast, and we raised about $10 million in seed capital with them, about 3 years as a startup mentor. So over the times working with a lot of those startup companies, I realized the foundation lies at the university level on most of the successful companies that we dealt with. And then we wanted to bring some of that experiences to the students. So today we have Graham joining us from PEI. So let me quickly put him on full screen. So Graham, how's it going?
It's going great, Medusa. How about yourself?
Good. So I remember calling. So last year, so this is the first time we ran DSC. Last year, I was calling all the universities and I was talking to one of your profs. And he was very skeptical, saying this is a very small school. The computer science department wasn't as big. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your school, your environment, and how you got into tech.
For sure. So I just finished my 4th year of my undergraduate at Mount Allison University. It's a very small school. There's around 2,500 students there. but it's a very engaged student body. So while it's very small and the computer science department doesn't have more than 30 majors over all of 4 years, at the same time you have a ridiculous amount of engagement in terms of the number of clubs that pop up. We have an AI society. We have a the DSC, which popped up, the Mount Allison Hackathon, which I started last year. And then we also had competitive programming competitions. And all of these things are run by this very small department of students who are all really excited to do things.
So what was the major challenges? Because what I realized was a lot of the companies, a lot of the students, a lot of those programs, they go through so much adversity, but there's a lot of learning that you can apply back to. I think we had this conversation going back and forth when I sent you some content. I think it was a little bit more advanced, and you came up with your own versions of how to learn Git or how to run Git. What other challenges did you have going through this?
For us, the biggest challenge was that you have a very different set of people that we had to cater to. So a lot of people were just starting out. And in order to accommodate that set of people, we had to suddenly iterate and change how we were presenting. Something that, comes back to entrepreneurship and how you start something and you think, oh yeah, this is how it's going to be. This is this brilliant idea, which came to us from Google, and they had all these amazing materials. And then we realized, oh, this set of people, they really need something else. We need to make more accessible materials for beginners who are just starting out. So we made presentations on how to do Git, a little bit on machine learning, but it turned out that was a little bit over their heads for some of them. And then we ended up working on a little project that we could work on that would essentially be a menu app for the university club, so that they could go in and then choose, okay, these are all the items that this person has purchased, add it to their tab, and then people would be able to keep track of those items. So we iterated over time and figured out, oh yeah, what we really need to do is get people engaged, get people happy with where they are, even though they aren't super experienced. And I think we did a decent job over it.
No, I think you guys did. And we're super excited for next year. And for those who are listening, a quick bit of trivia. So Graham is very good at stage presence. I think during our summit, remember we did that workshop about public speaking, and you kind of killed it. So if you ever do a session on, let's say, pitch competition, like how to present your pitch on stage, I'm going to bring you back. That being said, let's get back to the session in hand today. So take it away. And for the students who are listening in, we are taking questions from YouTube. Don't hesitate to put your question on the chat window. We're also live on Twitter. And for the ones who are on the live stream, unmute or send a little note on the chat window, and then we'll pause and we'll take your questions live. The more interactive it is, the better it is. Over to you, Graham.
Awesome. And don't feel afraid to interrupt me mid-sentence. Just go for it. I am very happy to entertain any questions or comments that you might have as we go through. So today's presentation and discussion is on how we can take an idea and build it into something bigger. Start prototyping it and then make it into sort of what it will look like, even though you haven't built it yet. And so a lot of the time when you start out with these things, you think, oh yeah, I have this brilliant idea. I'm going to make loads of money. It's going to be amazing. And what do? You get to the table, you pull out your computer and you start coding. I've done that so many times and it's very fun. And you feel good about yourself. And then in a few days, you actually have something that kind of works. And then you show it to somebody and they're like, yeah, but why is that doing that weird thing? And you're like, oh, but it's supposed to be that way. You're just stupid. And then they say, no, this app is stupid. information about a hackathon, so a content management system of sorts that allowed people to register for the hackathon with customized questions, and then ideally also show an itinerary of all the events where each of the event managers would be able to say, okay, here's a presentation associated with this event during the hackathon. Here's a link associated with this event, with this presentation. Have all of this management for the hackathon all in one application. And at the end of the event, we were thinking it would be great if people could submit their code through this application at the end of the hackathon and then get prizes and badges inside of that. So this was the idea for our project. And I'll be referring back to this throughout as sort of, okay, this is what I've done. And these are the terrible mistakes that we went through as we built it. So the first instinct that I mentioned was that you want to start building immediately. And by the time I had started working on HackApp, I'd realized, wow, this is a terrible idea. One time I tried to build a little application for managing a queue. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant. And I started building, and then I realized, wow, there are so many things I didn't realize I needed and important features that needed to be built. And because I didn't ever actually check and find out what it would end up looking like, what people actually needed, it ended up being to my detriment. So I realized I need to do a bit more planning. So for this application, we decided, okay, we're going to plan this out and figure out what are the requirements that we actually need and how will it look. So the first thing that we had to ask ourselves was, does it already exist? And everyone who's ever thought about building a startup has probably asked this question and said, okay, yeah, it probably does exist because most things sort of exist somewhere, which really sucks when you're trying to build a new, something new to bring into the world. But at the same time, even if it does exist, there's lots of opportunities. What makes your product different? For HackApp, yeah, stuff exists. There's this website called DevPost where you can sign up for hackathons and then submit your code, and it all works. But we really didn't like it. We looked at it and we said, wow, this is so unintuitive. We actually used it at a hackathon. And out of the 23 participants that were at the hackathon, one person actually successfully submitted something. Everyone else either didn't understand how it worked or couldn't be bothered because it was too complicated. So we realized that what was already on the market just didn't work. We wanted to find something that would be a better solution. And we had a perfect test bed, which was the Mount Allison Hackathon that we run every year. So to evaluate whether your idea is any good and to evaluate what you need in order to move forward, one of the things that I've picked up in business class is SWOT analysis. Some of you might have heard about this already. SWOT analysis is typically something that you do when your company is growing and you're trying to figure out, okay, what are my strengths? What are the things that I'm weak at? And what's happening in the world around me? What is the positive? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? So SWOT analysis is an evaluation of your business and everything around it to see how viable you are. And you can use that and change that according to how you want to develop your business.
It kind of came to my head. We had this discussion last week as well. Do you think it's wise for somebody to do an individual evaluation using the SWOT analysis just when they start thinking about becoming an entrepreneur? So they know what their strengths are, they know what their weaknesses are. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. SWOT analysis can really be used for anything. And it's really important to understand where you sit what you can do and identify your weaknesses so that you can find other people who will be able to fill in those weaknesses. And that is really valuable right off the bat for you to evaluate yourself and be able to improve on that so that you can make a product that's the best it can be. In addition to that, though, so SWOT analysis is something that you can do right off the bat, but it's something that will constantly evolve because over time, your strengths and weaknesses will change and your product strengths and weaknesses will also change. Because of that, this is something that you really should be doing all the time and figuring out, okay, what am I good at? What do I need to improve on? How can I leverage this? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm going to use HackApp as an example for this. So with HackApp, one of the, for our strengths, the real selling point was it was an all-in-one intuitive solution. Dev post, we said, it doesn't make any sense. It's too confusing. We wanted to have something that would make a whole lot of sense. And that was essentially our selling point. Now, on the weaknesses side, things are a little bit more complicated. Number one, we're a small group. In fact, there were only 2 of us working on the project. And that's a weakness because there's less reliable support for people who want to use our product. Additionally, we were both going to end up moving away. He's currently working at Amazon right now. And so he was not going to have time for this afterwards. And furthermore, I had an internship this summer. I'm going into a master's next year. I realized this isn't something that I can do long term. So essentially, whatever we build right now is what we have. That is a weakness that you have to consider in your SWOT analysis and figure out, okay, how can I overcome that? Is there something that doesn't require having support? Or is there maybe some other people who I can take on who will be able to support this in the longer term? This is a problem that continues to be a weakness of this project to date because neither of us have the time to support it. And that's something to consider when you're starting up a business, making sure that you have a plan for what happens afterwards. Our hope is actually that we're going to be passing this off to the Developer Student Club so that they'll keep on supporting it. Another weakness for us as a team, so you'll notice that in here I've pulled out strengths and weaknesses for the product, but also strengths and weaknesses for us as individuals who are on the team and building this product. We had very little experience. We built one full stack app before, and that was pretty much it. We'd taken loads of computer science courses. We were excited and thrilled. But when it came down to it, there were still so many things we didn't know. And at least to start, that's certainly a weakness. Of course, the longer you work on it, the more experienced you get. And if we were to redo this, experience probably wouldn't be one of our main weaknesses anymore. There would be more experienced people, but we're good enough that we would have done a very, very good job. And another way that we could have alleviated that is getting another expert on the team. So while this is a weakness that's on our SWOT analysis board, we could have easily changed that. And if you're starting a startup, you probably would want to see if you can get someone who has those deficiencies. We also had no publicity, which kind of sucked. And what you really need to do is figure out, okay, who's in charge of this sort of thing? Who's going to push forward on that? And if you don't want to do it, you need someone on the team who will. And since this was a class project, we ended up saying, it's not a huge deal. We're going to, hopefully it'll move forward in the future, but our lives weren't hinged on it at the time. So strengths and weaknesses, that's where we were as a team and as a product on our own. Externally, there's a lot more. So your opportunities. Well, we saw that dev post sucked. We've already talked about this. no offense to anybody who likes DevPost. If you've ever used DevPost, it's perfectly fine. We're just a little biased. And another opportunity is that during COVID-19, there's a lot of virtual hackathons going on. And that's an opportunity because we might be able to tap into that with the right type of publicity that would allow us to really gain market share. The threats, well, COVID-19 is also a threat because there's no in-person hackathons, which means that our strategy for publicity has to accommodate that. Additionally, DevPost might actually suddenly become a really good product that is really easy to use, and that's something that could be a threat in the future as well. So,
looking back at the opportunities part, so let's say if I'm building something for a customer, I trust what the customer is looking for, hence the opportunity is defined, right? Is there any thoughts around how you validated your definition of what that opportunity was? Now, I understand you went through the experience. Did you talk to others, or do you advise others, or maybe this is something you're going to talk about later down the road? What are your thoughts on that?
So definitely validating the idea is so critical. Actually talking to real people who will actually use it. This SWOT analysis is something that you do at the start, and then you talk to people and figure out what's actually happening, and then you reevaluate it after. So yes, in other words, you'll see a few slides about that in the near future. So instinct number 2 that you might have is, I know what to do. I see these opportunities. I see these threats. I see my strengths. I see these weaknesses. I know how to take advantage of this and make something amazing. Hold that thought. What do your potential customers think? Medusa can read my mind. He's truly brilliant. This is a critical step. And something that in this project I did a little bit of, but not to the extent that I should have. So what I had done was I went to the other people who were running the hackathon. I had a decent idea of it because I'd been the founder of the hackathon the previous year, and I thought, oh, I know how this works. I know what we need. But then I also asked, okay, hey, president for this year, what do you think? And she had very different ideas. And she gave a lot of feedback in terms of, okay, well, essentially we need a really solid way to get people registered as the foundation. Eventbrite is what we've used in the past. DevPost we've also used, and both of them are just complicated, and there's so much to think about. And that validated our idea that one of the opportunities is that people are looking for something simpler. Really, though, I really should have looked into what other hackathon managers are using. What are their thoughts? And getting out the door, finding out what that is. How do you find those potential customers? Well, for me, one of the people who I probably should have asked was Medusa, because Medusa has connections everywhere. And then through the Developer Student Club, there's so many people who have managed hackathons. I should have been reaching out to all those people. And that is something that I've taken from and realized, yeah, these are the missing things along the journey when I was doing Hackathon. With my current work, I work at a health startup that makes a social network for doctors. And that's what we do for everything. We ask customers directly. We connect with them. We figure out, okay, what are your needs? How can we make this work? We put out wireframes. We ask people on our team what they think. We make a beta product, and then from there, customers look at it and they say, wow, this is stupid. They give us feedback. We iterate. And that critical piece is, what do potential customers think? Even in just the ideation stage, making sure that you have your strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities nailed down really helps you plan for the future. Things you can ask potential customers include, what product do you use for hosting your hackathon, and does it suit your needs? So for us, a lot of people said, yeah, we don't really have something that works. We've flopped between Eventbrite and DevPost, and it hasn't worked. So that's a problem. What would convince you to switch from a competing product? So for our hackathon, it was sort of like, well, if it can successfully run all of the registration process, which wasn't very complicated, and be bug-free, and show all the information pertaining to the hackathon, and then have a way to submit your things, that would be enough for us to switch. That's an important piece of information that's really valuable to get from somebody, and they may not know, but regardless, it's really interesting to find out.
The willingness to switch. Nobody really pays attention to it. And that's good that you brought that up. Have you thought about, like, what kind of questions did you ask? So for example, if I'm already paying for something, if I invested some money into training, I'm talking about big other SaaS products that we had to deal with in similar situations. You assume since your product is so great and it has all these bells and whistles, and it might be even free, that they're willing to switch it automatically, not understanding their whole buying process or operations process or things like that. I really like you brought that point up, because that's something that a lot of us miss and don't even realize at any given time.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't have the power to even choose, because it's set by the organization. And essentially, they would have to put in a huge level of effort to get that to be changed. For instance, in the startup I work at, we're very nimble. We put things out very quickly, and it's an amazing experience. But even there, we have a member of our team who does all the wireframes and all of the prototypes. And there's a piece of software that he uses that is to die for. It's amazing. But to get our company to switch and pay for a different thing, it takes a lot more work than you'd think, because the right people have to sign off on it, and switching things and switching where money goes takes a lot of checks and balances. So
what's usually a sales cycle? Some of those sales cycles, it can take up to a year, right?
Yeah. It's a really long time. And because of that, there's that commitment that you have to have, and you need people who are pushing hard for it from the inside. And even then, it's not a guarantee. There's a lot of who knows, a lot of unknowns. But if you can identify what would make them petition for it, what would make them say, this is something I need, then you've got somebody who will advocate for you. And that is really powerful, because then you're not just testing, okay, do you like this idea? Then you have someone backing it who will help you promote it potentially and get actual users. So this is part of why finding customers before you've even built anything can be really valuable, because then you identify their needs, and then you have advocates who are helping shape your product using their feedback. Another thing is, how much would you be willing to pay for the product, which is very similar. And who do you know who would be interested? Because when you're going out there, when you're asking people these things, hopefully you'll hit somebody who has connections. And then from there, you can find more people to ask, more feedback to get, and hopefully down the road, more connections we will be able to get using your product. Things to consider. The other thing is that you'll get a lot of advice, hopefully. And the best advice is when you get an abundance of really hard to take advice. This applies anywhere, of course, whether it's your studies. For instance, I worked on a paper this past summer for summer research with some guys in France, and it was really cool. And my coworkers were super hard on me, and they asked all the questions, and they ripped me to shreds, and they ripped me to shreds over and over and over and over again for 3 months before finally I had something that was like, yeah, okay, this is a paper, decent, and then it got accepted. It's similar everywhere. The more advice you get, the harder it is to take that advice, and the more critical it is. Those are the places where you have to rethink your product and rethink how things work. And then that's when you actually create something that's better than the alternatives. Because your idea off the bat, sure, it might be better, but what really makes it magical is when you have all of these changes from all sorts of people who are potential users, and they have a say in where it goes. And then you realize, oh, cool, okay, this is what it takes to make something that people will actually use. So, part 1 of the market validation and prototyping stuff that we've discussed so far has been making sure that you've identified what makes your product or your business unique, making sure that you understand what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. You receive your feedback from your users, and then you probably might want to do step 2 over again and make sure that you understand, okay, yeah, based on our feedback, one of our strengths is actually that we're really small and nimble and we'll listen to customers, whereas this other company doesn't. So that's where you start. Then you think, oh yeah, let's get building. Well, not quite. Anyway, that's for what's to come. So what I'd like to take a moment to do is let all of you think for a little bit. What ideas do you have? And I'll ask Medusa, have any of the attendees here done this exercise already? Where they've thought of an idea, pitched it to the team, and done some analysis on their ideas?
Madison, Hashimuram, anybody want to comment on this? Any of the students want to comment on this?
Hey, so I made many presentations for experts in the field I'm working on. I'm trying to work on a new online educational model. Yeah, and I always try to get feedback and ask them what are the weaknesses of the model and why it's good. Yeah, and I always iterate it after each presentation.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose I'll ask this to everybody. So do you have any ideas that you really want to become a business, or just something you want to build, a project that you think could be beneficial to society? And give a few words as to what your analysis is on it and what you think your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats might be. And from there, I'd also like to invite anyone else who's on the call to provide feedback and say, okay, here's some other things to consider, some strengths, weaknesses, or even just ideas from their perspective. So if you have an idea, I'll give you 60 seconds. If anybody has an idea in these next 60 seconds, please pitch it out.
I can start. So,
Awesome. Thank
hi,
you.
my name's Ronald, and I was thinking about building a case management software for social workers to reduce their admin work and improve the efficiency of taking case notes. So that's the idea. I know that was less than 60 seconds, but that's the elevator pitch.
Awesome.
And if I was to do a SWOT analysis, I believe the strengths is that in the moment, all the applications that do exist for this, the case management softwares, are very broad in general. They don't target specific users. So we've been focusing on the mental health sector and autism. We've been working directly with directors of organizations with that to build it out for them. The weaknesses, I would say, is the fact that there are existing case management softwares, but they're all on the big organization level. So as you said, to get any organization to accept a new software, there's a lot of red tape to go with that. So our opportunity for that was to basically create it for independent social workers to basically turn their normal practice into private. And then our threat would be if one of the big organizations was to basically adapt towards this model.
That's really cool. So I'll ask an extra question for you. What are the differences in terms of what you would be building versus what one of the big organizations would be building? What are like a few selling points which would really attract people?
So my co-founder was actually working for a child and youth advocacy team for the last 4 years. So she actually was using one of these softwares. So like your story, they were using a software and they really realized what the disadvantages of the softwares and where the inefficiencies lie. So we're trying to build it out on a more user-centric base where we're building it up with the user rather than building it on what we think it should have, so that we could basically improve the efficiency from the beginning.
What about?
That's really cool.
Sorry.
You go ahead.
What about the competition? Have you looked at who else is doing this?
Yeah, we have. So there are some big companies out there. So there's Jane App, and there's like Dialogue, and there's a few others. But then they're all tackling it towards from a big organizational point. So they sell the software to organizations and not to individual users as such.
Right.
The small companies. So there's a company I helped out called I Am Health.
Okay.
What they did was the same thing, case management, but they did was they made it available for cops. So as you know, with what's going on right now, mental health cause certain issues, and cops overreact to this. So how do you manage it? So they built this whole system where the cases come into them and it's communicated to the police departments. Now, one other issue I notice a lot with SaaS products who are trying to sell to a government organization or has other regulatory elements to it, which you really need to dive deep into. You need to have a lot of patience, a lot of connections. You got to keep at it, and it's going to take a lot of time. A lot of the reasons those companies don't succeed is they don't have the time or the bandwidth to survive that time required. So it's something to keep in mind. And then find one good thing that you can do, and then you can go from there. So take that into consideration, and I would recommend you talk to others who try to do this.
If I can just pick your brain, so you did mention the cops thing, which is something we're looking into. So with people defunding the police, that sees more money going into social workers to act as first responders. What were some of the issues you thought about that this company looked into that you know of?
They've been working at this for 3-4 years, if I remember correctly. Then what they did was they realized, even though they live in Waterloo, the best customers or the best police departments were in somewhere else. I think San Francisco was one of those who were progressive enough to pick it up, because they do have the issue with a lot of substance abuse and then things like that in some of the regions. And then the other thing you got to keep in mind is sometimes success directly correlates to timing. So yes, we have this revolution happening right now, but I don't know when that's going to be something that's tangible that anybody can do anything with it. Maybe you're too early, maybe you're not. So it's something to keep in mind as well. So talk to a lot of other people. So blockchain is another good thing, right? Everybody, people are pitching blockchain left, right, and center. Anybody know Estonia is the only country that I know who runs everything on blockchain right now, right? And their whole healthcare system is on blockchain. Government documents are on blockchain. So find examples. So you got to go broader, not necessarily deeper. Just have more conversations quickly to figure out where those are, and then try to implement some of those learnings into your startup.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
Graham, I didn't mean
Thank
to
you for
take it
speaking
over.
Oh no, I really appreciated it, because this is a floor open to everybody. If anybody wants to speak up, including anybody in the audience, if you have any comments, this is the most valuable way to get feedback. Well, okay, second most valuable, because we're probably not your customers. Sorry about that, Ronald. But at the same time, this is the best way to get feedback is by asking and getting honest feedback from people who have no idea what's going on. Something that comes to my mind is someone who's completely unfamiliar is, okay, when you pitch it, which isn't what we were doing, but finding, okay, these are the bullet points that really make it truly unique. And something simple that you can say, like, this is simpler than all the alternatives. This does everything you need, or, well, what are the features that you have that are the core? Because I assume this is a leaner version of what other people have. And maybe that's something to say too. This is a lean, affordable alternative for independent individuals and small businesses. And having that, I mean, what's really cool is what you've said and those little elements that are in your SWOT analysis develop into your pitch. So yeah, it's all entangled, and all of the presentations you're probably getting are very, very similar in that they all come down to the same things. Does anybody else have anything that they want to, any ideas to pitch, thoughts to add?
Yeah, I want to try.
Awesome.
So my product called Brainio, I'm striving to stop the current online learning environment and make advanced learning more accessible. So
Cool.
it's built on four main components. Teach people the academic things to change how things work. It's fully of building and contributing to open source stuff, and having internships at top companies, and develop the mindset and skills that students can keep growing exponentially in their career, like after graduating from the program, and get mentoring from the top people at the space. Like the strength is that like Coursera or others like already got the VCs and their business model, so they can't change it. And because my models stand for few deep hands-on online specialization, while like Coursera for massive courses and like users. So like I have the opportunity to keep few programs and have more impact. The opportunity is, the opportunity is that the market needed right now. There are a lot of unemployment, and there are a lot of people that want like to learn about emerging technologies, and the graphs like make people see that a lot of talent is needed. The weaknesses is reinventing the wheel after getting money from a VC or something. Yeah, and the other thing is not be able to get the partnerships to convince hard worker students to join the program. Yeah, and the threats are like reinventing the world.
So here's a question for you. Do you know who those experts who are going to be mentoring people are? And do you have connections there who are already interested in participating in that?
Yeah, like there are already some companies that were so interested in that, and there's kind of proof of concept that we had kind of survey for the top companies in the industry, and we asked them, if you have the opportunity like to fund the curriculum, would you hire the students from the curriculum? And they said yes.
Good. So
yeah, and I have the conditions of the space to run the first experiment.
So clearly one of your threats is that there's a lot of different competitors in this space, because it's a very popular, and also it has a lot of money in it at this time, for sure. Go ahead. how do you see yourself gaining a foothold? And do you have the marketing power and connections that you think you need in order to actually get people to take the courses that you're going to be providing?
Yeah, like I do the partnerships, and I already started like doing the interviews with people. Yeah, I know the executive director of Ethereum Foundations and like Electric Coin Company and like the big companies in the space. So if they posted it, a lot of students will be interested. Yeah,
That's
and
good.
I think I know some people that like they are educators in the space that would like to be a committee for the curriculum I'm building. So the idea is that I would get 3 professors and 3 CEOs. So it's not so academic and not so real life.
Cool. I see a lot of potential. There's lots of things, like as someone completely external, I'd want to also see, okay, why do I choose your platform over Coursera? Like in 2 sentences, what would you say for that?
Yeah, Coursera only teach the surface, had no specific audience, and only care about the count of courses. I care about giving deep understanding for the people, get them a senior level job, and have a track of record that the top 1% companies want.
Cool. Okay. That's a really good pitch. Well done. There's so much to explore, and I'm looking forward to see where that pans out. Does anybody else have any comments on that, or questions, concerns? It can be as grilling as you want it to be, because now's the best time when you're in the idea stage to pivot and explore. Yeah. Radio silence. Well, fear not. There'll be more. Hey, someone agrees and says, great pitch. Good stuff. Okay. On we go. On to the great adventure of prototyping. All right. So prototypes are pretty freaking awesome. If I'm honest, they're my favorite part of developing an application. And that's pretty crazy because I love building things and it's pretty cool. And I used to always skip this stage. I thought prototypes, who needs them? They're just, you know, sort of drawings that take a lot of work, and it feels like a waste of time if you already know what you want to build. But the key thing is you probably don't know what you want to build exactly, especially because it all depends on what people's feedback is. And the idea of a prototype first is to validate what you think your product should be based on what we just discussed, what all of those strengths and weaknesses are and the opportunities. You're tailoring your prototype to fit those. And then you put it in front of a user and say, here you go, what do you think? And they look at it and say, okay, there are pieces of this that I'm really grateful for, that I prefer over other products, but there are pieces of it that aren't great. And prototypes, even though they take a long time, are a really cheap way, both in terms of time, if you're paying someone to do them, or if you're doing it yourself, or money if you're paying someone. So while it takes a long time, it can be really, really worth it if you want it to be used by other people and be tailored to their needs. So why use it? User interface is the first impression. It's what people see. It's all they see. That's what they see. So figuring out what that first impression is going to be like, it's kind of like, what's my pitch? What's my pitch to people, the elevator pitch that gets them to sign up for something, to agree to buy something? Your user interface is that pitch for most users who are going to be visiting your platform or your whatever product you're selling, trying to figure out, okay, what is that impression? And the other thing about prototypes is it allows you to explore your features and make sure that you're including features that are understood by the users. They intuitively know what's going on, and it's clear that those features are available. it's always terrible when you implement some awesome feature and nobody can figure out that it even exists, let alone understand how to use it. Prototypes allow you to make sure that those features are available and understood without having to build them and have to rebuild them later on. Additionally, there's some accessibility concerns that you can address through the prototyping stage, whether it's through, making sure that it's accessible to the standard user, making sure they understand the features, understand how to use it, or if it's actually looking for, what are the accessibility concerns for people who are disabled, people who are colorblind? You can, there are tools that allow you to actually look at your prototypes and check for colorblindness, and some glasses you can put on to make that happen, or glasses that reduce your vision so that suddenly those things that are in size 11 font, you just can't read anymore. And that's really valuable if you want to make sure that your application is used by the clientele that you expect to use it. It all depends on who you're making it for, but making accessible applications in general is a good idea. So, prototypes. The last piece that I'll put in is it allows you to define your minimum viable product, because you've talked about it, you've said, this is what I want. And then when you actually prototype it, you might find a few different things. One thing is, wow, my application is huge. This is going to take way too much work. And you have to pare it down and turn that into a smaller package and figure out, maybe this is my minimum viable product. And then you test it and you realize, this person actually needs more. This person needs this feature that I cut. Defining your minimum viable product and testing it and then reiterating what that minimum viable product is. This is one of the greatest places to test it that's really affordable and doesn't take as much time. The last thing is that it's also a heck ton of fun. It's probably my favorite part of the development cycle. So I hope you enjoy it.
Graham, you mentioned, obviously you enjoy doing this.
Yeah.
That's why you're doing a master's on it.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about what you're studying, or why this path, and what specifically are you going to focus on? Because this itself is very important. It's a huge area of study. Apple kind of took it to the next level, and that helped them stand out. I know Shopify and all these other leading companies are implementing this. What can these guys learn? What are you studying? Like, what? Give us a quick 30-second to a minute overview about this program that you're doing.
So my program, I am going into HCI, human-computer interaction, to see how people interact with technology and evaluating that. So it's an intersection between computer science, people skills, and art, and figuring out how all those pieces come together. How those things come together becomes what people perceive of your product, which is in effect pretty much what your product is. It's all about perception and how they use it. And my specific research will be on how you can use, my current research proposal is how you can use your body to control a computer using full body motion and make music, which I am so excited about. So there's so much you can discover about how we interact with technology. And prototypes are one segment of how that works. It allows you to figure out what makes people tick and what will make them use your product and not feel like they are idiots or feel like they're incompetent. And those are important considerations when you're iterating to make sure that people feel confident and happy when they're using your product so that they keep on coming back. Okay. So there are so many tools when it comes to prototyping, and there's a lot of things you can do. You can Google prototyping tools and so many things will come up. I'd recommend, at least to start, doing something maybe with pen and paper, figuring out, okay, this is in general what I want. And then from there, seeing where that takes you. So I'm going to start with connecting my computer over here and seeing if this will work. Oh, I think it will. All right. So step one, whenever I'm figuring out how prototypes will work, is actually just drawing diagrams and saying, okay, for HackApp, what I want people to see first and foremost is what's going on, what hackathons are available. Pardon?
Can everybody see? Are you sharing your screen? Or?
Are you able to see my screen right now? I take that as a no.
No.
Oh, frig. This is tragic. Okay. Present my entire screen.
Bad human interaction design. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this is terrible. All right. Can you see my screen now? Yes, you can. Can you see a square on the screen? Oh, brilliant. Okay, so this is me with a touch device, and this is how I like to start things off. Typically, I don't do it on like this application. It's just what I had to do for this presentation. But just doing simple doodles that say, okay, when I start the application, I'm going to have this little thing that has, okay, this is the title, and then I want to have cards of this is an event that's going to happen, Hack the North, and I'll have the date, and then I'll have more of these, and figuring out in general how this will look, and then figure out, okay, after I'm on this page, I'm going to go to this other page. And you'll notice that these sketches are terrible. If you looked at these and you thought, like, you'd probably think, what the heck is this guy doing? But it's a really valuable step in order to figure out what you want out of your application. So frequently, this is how I start, just by sketching things out and seeing what comes of it. And I make these little arrows to figure out, okay, this is where we start, where we go to, and then you have a very rough idea of what's going on. Okay, this is step one. I'm not going to go super in depth because a lot of you already know how to sketch things on paper. I'm going to probably have some issues with my present mode, so I'm going to probably disappear for a second. Crossing my fingers it comes back. All right, can you see my screen? Wow, this is shocking. I love it when technology.
The presentation is not there.
Oh, the presentation isn't there? This is really weird. Okay. You are correct. Share my entire screen. There. Okay. Here we go. We are almost live. There we go. One of the things that I got introduced to through the developer student clubs was this app called Marvel. And Marvel, you can get it on your phone, and it's so cool because you can just take pictures of all of those sketches that you've done on paper. And then you link them up so that when you click one button, it takes you to the next screen and you can test out the workflows. So that's like level 2 prototyping. You figured out how users will be able to interact with these visual elements. So you've got the art side and you've got the design side. And things start to get cool right about here. Step 3 is where you actually formalize that. And that's when you can use some online tools such as Figma, Adobe XD, or even Marvel has a version of it that actually works for some better versions of your application. So I'll demo Marvel and Figma for different things. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of, oh, frig, I'm just gonna have to bring this over here. I'm not a huge fan of how Marvel works sometimes. because it's somewhat limited in how it has a limited interface, but it's really fast to get going with your prototypes. So I built the whole prototype for HackApp in this application. It doesn't quite look like the final product, but it's not bad. So what I've done is I've gone into each of these and I've edited each of these. So I can go in here and show you a little bit of how these things work. I can just dump in a square and say, oh, look at this lovely square. It's beautiful. It's bright green. Now it is black. And I can set that over here. And then maybe I can add some text or something like that. And from here, we have a prototype, which allows us to explore, okay, these are the sorts of things that I want to show the user. The really nice thing about this application is that it's really easy to go really fast. And you don't need to know a whole lot in order to get started, which is amazing. It just sort of works. And from there, after I close this, I can start the application by pressing play. And I've set up some interactions so that when I click register, it moves to the next screen. You see the changes that we just did, and you can move on. Now, with this application, I was able to put this in front of some actual users, the president of the hackathon at my university, and say, hey, try this out. And they got to try it out and say, okay, I want to click some of these buttons and see what happens. Sometimes they would click a button that's not allowed because you're only going to prototype so many things. And then you move through the screens, you can figure out, okay, this is what you're ultimately going to see. And they can critique it along the way. So for instance, over here, I had the feedback of, this thing makes no sense. What the heck is this thing doing? And furthermore, a lot of pieces of this interface were a little bit vague. For instance, okay, you've got this registration details page, but what am I actually trying to figure out? The user was completely confused. Ultimately, this page was supposed to say, okay, this is where you put in your markdown for, or this is where you put in all of the questions for asking people for registration info, like dietary restrictions. And it wasn't clear in the interface what it was really supposed to do for some people. But I wouldn't have known that unless I had prototyped it, which was really useful. And then we get to here, we've got some more things to do, and then bam, the hackathon is live. And ultimately, I managed to get a person to try it out for me, which is the real value of these prototypes. You get to see how other people use your application before you've even developed it. Okay, so I'm going to take a slight detour and ask you folks, have any of you used prototyping before? And what experiences have you had? Just chime in whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, can I just hop in?
Please do.
Yeah, so one of the bigger examples is a couple of about like a year and a half ago, I was trying to build this app, this car sharing app, and one of the big drawbacks was that it was hard to organize something like sharing a car amongst our ideal size of 4 people.
Mhm.
So I tried a prototyping tool where I did like a Calendly sort of system where people would book different dates, and any dates that would line up would be like be highlighted. And I was all ready to start building it out. But after I got some feedback, started showing it to people. One of the biggest drawbacks I found was that, like, even getting to those dates were way too few and far between, that like people that people would rarely use the car because it just wasn't worth it. putting down so much money for using a car like only so many days.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit more of a like problem with the execution on the idea, but yeah, we're enough for prototyping and developing that wireframe first, and I definitely would never have caught that.
Yeah. It's true. It's really cool how prototypes allow you to not just validate how it looks, but the functionality behind the scenes and even the whole viability of the business. Because all of a sudden you have the opportunity to see how people actually think and how they react to this application. That's a really good story. Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
Does anybody else have anything that they've experienced?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Sorry. I've actually worked with Marvel. It was during a hackathon. I was with my team, and we worked with Marvel for the prototyping.
Yeah.
Because we weren't sure how quickly we'd be able to finish the app, because we only had 36 hours, right? So we weren't sure whether we wanted just the prototype or how quickly we'd be able to finish the actual app. So then we were able to do the prototype really quickly. Like you said, sometimes it's really easy to just go ahead with an idea because you think that it's amazing, and then you think that everyone will use it, and then you spend a lot of time on it, and then it turns out that there's stuff that doesn't work. So I found it really helpful because I had personally never worked with prototyping or Marvel before. It was my friend who recommended it to me. And then when we used it, I realized that it was super helpful because not only was it really quick to use, it was really easy to just like build up a quick flow of how the app should work, but then also I was able to see which parts like clearly didn't work, clearly wouldn't work with the flow of the program, not even saying the program itself, just the idea. And then through that we were able to just like change those super quickly, and then even ask people to test it out, see how they liked it. So I thought using the prototyping with Marvel, because I had personally never worked with prototyping before, I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
And that's my experience with Marvel.
Amazing. I am so with you there. Yeah, the first time I used Marvel was not until this past year, and my world was turned upside down, 100%. I think one other person was it Tharan? I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But yeah, I'm not on the Marvel wave yet. I'm actually using Figma. I'll check out Marvel after this. But yeah, I've actually coincidentally have been using it at the moment to really prototype and really figure out the layout of my website. It's pretty interesting, I wouldn't say it's all, daisies and roses. I've been having some, trouble really, I guess, moving it from pen and paper to really, putting it on the computer. So it's been a little tough there, but, I think I'm starting to get it a little better, and I've been seeing some really great improvement in workflow.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Figma because if I'm honest, I enjoyed my time with Marvel, and there's some pieces of Marvel which are really cool in that I can go in, I can edit a design, and then I can add right out of my toolbox some wireframing elements. So I can be like, oh, I want a tab bar for an iPad, and instantaneously, boom, I have a tab bar for an iPad. Which is amazing, but then it doesn't scale very well. There's some things that either I haven't figured out or just are a little bit more hidden to make things look really simple for the user to use Marvel. Whereas I've used Figma recently and I have fallen in love. So this isn't an actual project with my company because I can't show you one of those. And some of those I'm really proud of and excited by because there's such advanced things you can do with the prototyping here. But the awesome thing about Figma is you can make things look exactly how things will look for the end user. And when you're with a company, that's what they require. Like, they have a UX designer who goes in, builds the prototypes, hands it to the developers, and developers are expected to just make it verbatim what the designer had made. And I realized, whoa, this is so cool. You can make anything with Figma. So when I play this, you not only have the screens showing up, but you can also have...
Really scroll through it.
You can have some, you can go through it, and you can even have modals that show up. So I can go in here. You've probably found this already, but I can just make an extra frame over here, and then I'll say, okay, I want to make a button over here, which is going to have no fill and just have a stroke of 2 pixels wide, and it's going to have some text inside of it, which is going to say, go to my site, or no, go to something random. And you can make it extremely quickly and beautifully. And then from there, I can just switch to prototyping mode and say, okay, whenever someone clicks on the connect on LinkedIn button, I want to go to frame 1 and overlay it with that. And then whenever someone clicks the this thing, we're going to close the overlay. And that is one of the coolest things about it that I found. So if I go back here and click on there, then you have this modal that shows up. You can change it so that your modal actually has some background behind it. Let's see if I can figure this out, because it's been a little while since I've done this. Oh yeah, sorry. It's gonna take one moment, and I have it centered, add a background behind the overlay, and then you have a background. So I completely agree that, yeah, Figma is awesome, man. It allows you to do some amazing things, experiment with things before anybody has to actually use your product, and make sure that people are okay with it. Now, when you're just developing for a smaller project, it might be overkill to like completely design your app to be perfect and exactly in high fidelity what it will ultimately be. That's essential in a larger company, like a small to medium-sized company. But for just doing a quick thing, or a smaller project as a startup, you may or may not want to go that route, depending on where you want to spend your time.
Sorry, I don't know if you're taking questions yet, but I just wanted to ask.
Go for it.
In terms of like, is responsiveness something, I think you mentioned it, but is responsiveness something that you should take into account when you're creating a prototype? And is there any way that you can, is there any like tips that you have to make it easier to make your, so I'm making a website or a web app. So is there any way that, you know, are there any tips that you have that you could have to make it easier to make your prototype more responsive to a different viewpoint?
Oh, yes. Oh, that's a good point. So
what that responsive means to everybody.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the big things with web development especially, but for most development these days, is it's viewed on multiple different screen sizes. And here you're seeing the view from a phone. If you were looking at it from a laptop, things would look a lot different. So for instance, you'll find that my my personal website doesn't quite look like what it looked like there, because I just started doing random things and realizing, oh, you can do some really cool stuff. So on mobile, it looks like this. And then when you click on one of the things, this thing pops up. It's very similar to the mock-ups you just saw, except the difference is that I have a really vibrant background on it, because, I don't know, I felt like it at the time. And then once you get to a larger screen size, it changes the look. So responsiveness is important when you're developing the final app. In terms of how you make it for a prototype, Marvel, I haven't been able to figure out how you would do it. Figma, I've also never actually tried to do it explicitly, but what you can do is this. You can set things up so that okay, you have your mobile app like here that's going to be viewable from a certain screen size. Here it's an iPhone 11 Pro. And then you can set things up to also have, you might use another page and show the laptop view over here. Now that's not responsive. That's two separate mockups. What you can do to make it easier when you switch between the mockups, though, is you can set things up so that rather than having everything absolutely positioned, as in saying this item has XY coordinates in 3D space, you can see this has XY coordinates in 3D space, which is, you don't do that when you build an actual website because it won't scale according to what screen size you have. You can actually do some things. I just learned this last week, actually. I'm not gonna lie. You can collect some items and then you can group them together in a frame and then apply auto layouts to them. So here I can, this is very specific to Figma, but some people might find it really interesting. You can set it up so that these items are all grouped together. And then when I go in and work with this contact thing, I might actually make this into a frame as well and use an auto layout as well. What that allows me to do eventually is I can change the layout on the fly very quickly with these little sliders, but then I can also change things very quickly by, once I've configured it properly, I can actually configure it so that things move in an appropriate manner when they go onto different screen sizes. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, no, I didn't know about that feature either, so that's definitely very helpful. No, thanks.
No problem. Does anybody else have any questions on building prototypes? This is a great time to do it. Prototypes make me fired up. They're so cool. Oh man. You'll notice also that sometimes you don't need to have a high fidelity prototype. Like this is so simple. And when you look at the actual thing, it's changed its look over time. But this allowed me to explore how it would look early on without having to worry too much about a lot.
Graham, are you gonna cover collecting feedback later?
Oh, I don't know.
So
I don't think so.
In that case, so let's say you got your prototype ready.
Oh, yes, I did.
Okay, okay, all right. Okay.
I forgot what my next slide was. So the next thing about your prototypes is exactly that. It's trying to identify not only, okay, how you like it to look, how you fly through the diagrams, but just like your ideas with your SWOT analysis, how you had to ask other people and find out how they felt, putting this in the hands of actual people is also really important in order to understand how they perceive it. You can ask them questions like, do you understand how the user interface works? So what elements of this design are confusing? Is this a button or is this just a boxed item? And making sure that those things are understood correctly by your users is critical. Another thing that people don't understand when they are looking at this mockup is that these buttons are buttons. They're not just sitting there. And you'll notice that in the real setup, there's little boxes that appear on hover or on focus. Another thing is, what about the UI is unintuitive to you? So what doesn't make sense? What are the problems that you see? So what we had done on the mobile side over here, and we were playing around with, we added a button so that when you clicked on LinkedIn, this thing showed up that said, go to LinkedIn. And why does that exist? It doesn't make any sense. Well, in this stage, maybe it won't be as blatantly obvious as that, but you'll have feedback from users saying, I thought that that would do that, but instead it did this. So making sure that the workflow is actually what people are expecting and want. Another question you'll want to ask is, what are the missing features you would need before actually using it? That defines what the minimum viable product is, because as the user's using it, they might realize this doesn't have a critical feature. For instance, with HackApp, maybe what the user really needed was to have that feature where code was submitted at the end of a hackathon. And there's no page that I wireframed using that. I was hoping I could get away with it without it, because I had to do so many wireframes in Marvel just to get that done. And I realized, wow, this project is going to take a lot longer than I had expected. And that's another benefit of prototyping. You figure out what the scope of your project is by realizing, wow, this is taking me a long time to prototype. It's going to take me even longer to build it. So that allowed me to focus my scope. And then I asked people, okay, what do you actually need? And to start with, it wasn't a critical feature. So I moved forward with the prototype using only those pieces, at least at the beginning. Then what elements of the UI do you find unappealing? So we start out with what are the functionality pieces that you really need? And then now it's like, okay, what are the nitpicky things that you also need to consider? So when you look at this application and you look at this page over here or this page, you'll notice that, wow, this section up here doesn't make any sense. That looks butt ugly. I don't like that. And that's also valuable feedback. People will understand, okay, this is, you'll be able to figure out, okay, this is what I need to do to change it. So that's a lot of it. Now that you evaluate it and get feedback from people, you might think, I can fix this as I go, which you can. And I'll confess that I did that with the application that I just talked about. But as I've gotten more experience, I realized there's a lot of value to prototyping and getting it to be exactly how you want, so that essentially you build all the creative stuff in this stage. You build out all of the pieces, and essentially everything's decided. And when you get to coding, it's just coding. You're like, I'm home free. All I have to do is build this thing, which has already been decided by me in advance.
So Graham, I got a question around that.
Yeah.
So you said you just start coding, but what if you want to make changes? Do you take any tips on what stacks to use? What kind of tools or systems to use when you actually start building it, that this integration works seamlessly? Do you take that into consideration, or is there any tips that you can share?
I do have something that is really useful. So one of the things I'm somebody, so when I develop web apps, I am really partial to React. The reason is because it combines all of your styles and your HTML code and the logic into nicely packaged little pieces that say, okay, this is one individual unit, and it's under 200 lines of code. It's just one styled component. And then you can drag that onto the screen. Well, not physically drag it. You can code it onto the screen and say, this is this individual beautiful unit, which makes it really easy to iterate with. When I use React, there's one particular thing that is really easy to get started with called Material UI, which folks at Google know a lot about, because it's a Google thing. So Material UI, there's a Material UI library for React. There's probably a Material UI library for whatever application you want. But the idea is that you get these items like these buttons and these drawers that are pre-made for you. And so all you have to do is put in your code, I want a drawer, and then a drawer appears, and you just style it to be the exact kind of drawer that you desire. So sometimes they come with a lot of overhead, but especially if you're building a product quickly, it can get you a real head start in making things fast. You can get that for React, you can get that for other things. And you can even get it for your prototyping application. For instance, Figma material design is actually a theme kit that's provided that you can find online. And in this theme kit, which will load someday, it's a pretty intense, large kit. It has all of the information on the side. So you have a whole bunch of different material components, which means you've got drop downs, you've got little cards over here that look really, really nice, that have been styled for you. And I can just go in, copy it, and then I can go into my application and say, I'm gonna paste it in here. I don't know if I can paste it right there. And then boom, you have this gorgeous component really quickly that translates into your framework of choice by using the material library.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I just wanted to put in here. Is this this theme kit, is this like open source, or did you create it?
Nope, this is open source. You can just Google it and it'll be there for you.
Gotcha. Thanks.
It's got multiple pages worth of craziness. Like, this is huge. You probably can't see it because the screen resolution is not great, but you can see that there's so many components. There's also an icon kit, and they're a great place to get started on designing your wireframes and then actually building your application with them, which can improve the speed. To answer Medusa's question from a while ago. That was really long-winded. Sorry about that.
That was great, Graham.
All right, I'll keep on going unless someone butts in, which you're always welcome to. Please butt in anytime.
Do you have any more tips for learning how to use, say, Figma? I thought that was a really great tool. Thanks for sharing that with us, the material design theme kit. But I figure kind of just practice and building things as you think of it will kind of help you learn. But was there any other learning tools or resources that you used?
So I, for the most part, just jumped in and started playing around, and gradually I would realize, oh, I can't figure out how this works. For instance, the first time I tried building an application in Figma, I was really confused as to how to make things scroll. And there was just a checkbox that I had to check and say, yep, this thing scrolls, it's fine, it's fine. And that made things really easy for me once I had done that. So I sort of just dived in, but there are some really good tutorials on Figma that I actually used while I was going along. And they have their own YouTube channel and community resource area that has a lot of things which are actually pretty decent to check out. There's a lot of things in Figma which take a while to learn and are hidden because there's like infinite power. When I go in here, I can actually just create custom shapes and just decide, oh yeah, I'm going to have this like crazy blob around my name and it's gonna look totally awesome. Add a fill and then say that I want this to move to the back. I think I have to click done. And most of the time I can say send to back and then have it appear like that. So I discovered that with this kind of tool, you can actually create all of the icons you need straight in Figma too. Because it has that pen tool, you can group things together, put it in a frame, and then bam, you've got your icons which can be used and then exported to your code. That's what one of my coworkers does whenever he makes his prototypes. He just makes all the icons directly in here, and then pulls them out. Whenever I build stuff, I tend to steal it from another project which is available online, which is the Material Icons library. And the Material Icons library just has a whole bunch of icons, and you can look at it and be like, oh man, you know what I really need? I need a GPS indicator. You take that GPS indicator, copy it, paste it, and bam, you've got your GPS indicator icon.
Awesome, great, thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, these prototyping tools are amazing. The other nice thing about Figma is that it's free until you start doing things collaboratively. And if you do that, then you have to limit the size of your team who can edit things or something like that. These companies have to make money somehow, so fair enough. But really, really valuable stuff that can make things go really fast. Anyway, okay, unless there are other questions that pop up, keep on button in, please do. I'll keep on trucking along. There's not much left, so don't feel bad. So you're thinking that you can fix things as you go. That's always possible. In fact, you'll notice with my personal website, things took quite a turn from being this black and white theme to having a serious gradient in the background. And that's okay. But having that iteration with the prototypes is also really valuable so that you can get more feedback and people will still have more to say. There's always going to be more feedback, always going to be more you can improve. You'll never get the perfect product, but you'll get to the point where it's good enough that nobody will care. And you have to draw that line somewhere and say, okay, after I've been iterating for long enough, it's good enough. So here, our checklist, we've built the prototype, we got feedback, we iterated, we got feedback, we made a really high fidelity, gorgeous version, we got feedback, we keep on iterating. It depends on how much work you want to put into this process. The more work you put in, the less you'll have to do later. But there's this curve of like, okay, where will I get the most benefit from this? Is it better to fix all of the problems in this stage? Or is it better to leave some of the problems for later stages? And as you develop, there might be some other complications that have to change anyway. So all things to keep in mind. There's lots of different workflows that you can go for. But my company likes to do a lot of iteration, and that results in some gorgeous designs. Even though the early designs were gorgeous, by the end, you look at it and you're like, yeah, this makes total sense. And that intuitiveness is really, really valuable. So this is pretty much where it ends, with you getting a crap load of money and being happy with your prototype. Well, actually, you still haven't built the product yet. But this has taken sort of the journey from the start where you're just having an idea, testing it out with some market validation, doing some analysis to make sure it's valid, getting feedback, doing more analysis, then turning that into a prototype that you iterate on so that people will actually use it and hopefully give you all of their big bags of money. So this has been Ready, Set, Iterate, getting started with product validation prototyping. The floor is open. If you have any questions, thoughts, products that you have, if you didn't get a chance to pitch your thing before, now is a great time to do it because you've got. Yeah,
sorry,
go for
I
it.
didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah, I wanted to get a chance to really pitch my product, get the 60 seconds in. I didn't do it before because I get a little nervous in front of a crowd.
Totally.
But you know, I think I sort of built up the confidence to do that in the past half an hour. So
Awesome.
all right. So my product, Insura, is a online platform that connects insurance recruiters and insurance firms and insurtech companies with high school and millennial tech talent, where insurance firms post a lot of different insurance opportunities like hackathons, case competitions, and the opportunities to work on a lot of great tech products to these students. And students get the opportunities to participate in these activities and possibly be rewarded with a lot of other new opportunities in insurance, like the ability to get an internship or the opportunity to work on this really large insurtech project, to really to show students that there's a lot of innovation and a lot of technology that needs to be in the industry, and there's a lot of technology that needs to be played in the industry. I know that wasn't the most articulate. I wouldn't say I'm the most articulate person, but there's my 60 seconds.
Hey, it always has to start somewhere. Even my ideas to start off, and I'm not an expert by any means. I don't think anybody, like, you're always growing, you're always getting better. And that was a great start. So what do you have to do after you get started with that? You get more feedback and get people to ask you questions. And then from there, you can iterate your pitch over time. I take way too much time practicing these sorts of things. And for a lot of people, it makes a lot of sense to do that. And I definitely recommend, at least when you get started making pitches, you can put in days worth of practicing into getting the right pitch, especially because you go off script as soon as you're in front of a real person, making sure that you communicate what you want to communicate. And that's a real skill. That's a performance. So don't feel bad. Absolutely don't feel bad. And that goes for everybody. Like, the first time you do a pitch, it's probably gonna suck. And that's okay, because you're gonna get so much better with every go. And yeah, in terms of questions. Okay, so question number one, what is the exact product that you're offering?
Sure, yeah, sorry if I didn't make that really clear, but what I'm creating is an online platform. So it's actually really similar to the Hackup that you created. It's the idea of like digital, like online platform. But I think it's more general than just hackathons in that a lot of different opportunities, but a lot more specific towards the insurance industry.
So what are the features that make your application different from some of the competition? Like, whether it's Eventbrite, whether it's Eventbrite's a good example. What makes your platform different?
Well, I think it's the idea that I'm able to reach out to, or I have this user base of people who are willing to explore insurance, because I find that, and a lot of insurance firms find that when they try to canvas tech talent, they're often more interested in a lot of the more glamorous, companies like Fang, Google, a lot of the companies down in Silicon Valley, and things like that, which really sort of outshine outshine these insurance companies, which are a lot more established and thus get the stigma that they're a lot more behind the curve. And so what I guess I'm offering, or I guess my value proposition is saying, hey, I have this group of people who who are willing to, do a lot more tech within your industry and really innovate it. So, be on my website.
So I suppose at that point, your question is, well, my question would be, how do you attract those people? How do you keep them engaged in ways that platforms like Eventbrite don't?
So I've actually reached out to a couple of different organizations. So I've reached out to the Insurance Institute of Canada, and they seemed really interested in my idea, and they said they would be super down to help me host a lot of different events if I wanted to. And they already have a pretty big user, or I guess they have a pretty big outreach. They get at least a couple hundred people per session they do during quarantine. They've been doing a lot of talks, coffee chats through that. And so it would be really great to canvas some users through that. And another thing that I ran by them was, having some talks along with them and a lot of great insurtech companies. I'm not sure if you're familiar with companies like Lemonade, which just went public and is, really starting to grow in the insurtech space. So those are some ideas that I have to sort of canvas more users.
Cool. That's really good that you have an entry point, a way to market yourself. And that would be one of your strengths because you've got that connection that will allow you to get there. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm curious to see where it ends up.
Thanks.
Do other people have comments on that or their own ideas that they want to chat about? Very open floor right now, gaping open, just willing to take on all of the people. I can do that, yes. Oh boy, I think I just did it. I may be a computer scientist, but sometimes tech still doesn't like me.
Sorry, did someone gonna say something or?
No, go for it.
Yeah, no. I was just wondering if anyone else had anything to say. That's fine, but I was wondering if we could continue a little more. I guess with the SWOT analysis, if that's fine. So I think we talked about like the strengths of being able to have an entry point. But do you think, I guess from an outside view, maybe talk about some of the weaknesses, some of the threats, and like I'd really welcome you to be completely honest, just because that would like really help me.
I guess I can kick off the ball. One possible thing is that, well, it depends on how you position yourself and how you're integrating with with those insurance companies. Because if you're positioning yourself as, okay, this is a place to get registered for these events, then that's sort of like, okay, that's sort of Eventbrite's territory. And you might have challenges there. If you're positioning it as you're organizing, are you potentially organizing the events themselves, or are you just providing space for people to organize them?
Well, I think the focus is more of being the platform for other people to organize these events. But I think for some kickoff events or some special events, we could definitely host some. But I think the main function of the platform is to really let these insurance firms host their events.
And would those also be virtual or in person?
Well, I think it's a matter of the conditions we're in. So obviously with COVID, and I know the Insurance Institute of Canada has definitely been hosting a lot of virtual events. But once the pandemic subsides, there's definitely going to be a lot greater of a mix of virtual events and in person.
Yeah. So what does your platform encompass is the next question. What are the list of features that you've identified as the major pieces that these companies require? So registration for these events, do they also require your own video conferencing sort of thing for those virtual events, or do you use Google Meet, for instance, or Zoom? What other elements do you need?
So I guess in terms of like features, there's definitely the ability to post the events, but in terms of like the actual communications for their specific events, that would be on them to use their third-party platforms. But I think, I'm sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this, but there was also like the opportunity for companies to post internships. So I would definitely have like an IM platform on the platform, which I'm actually working on right now.
Cool. So
sorry.
Yeah, you'd sort of have like an online job board to coordinate with those events potentially.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of more of a mix of those, sort of like a mix of, an online job board sort of event, right? Kind of mashed together in the team of insurance.
Yeah. I think that the differentiating factor for you that is valuable is having that mixture. And it might be interesting to see what the company's needs are in terms of how they want to advertise their positions, whether they want to essentially host these events, and then for anybody who's been to that event, they have these opportunities that show up on their job board that are more important, that appear. I think the greatest challenge that you'll have is finding people to use the platform. Because yes, if you get one of those big companies, the insurance companies, to use your platform, you'll get people using that. The question is, will they only use your platform, or will they also use another platform? Will they find more or less success on Eventbrite versus your platform? And having those differentiating factors is really important, because otherwise they'll probably go with the tried and true method that already has a colossal user base. So having those differentiating factors and emphasizing those when you first go on or when you're pitching on it is probably really valuable.
For sure. Thank you for the thanks for the advice.
No problem. Bring it on. Be fearless. One of the hardest parts about this is just sharing it and having your work open for everybody else to see, for everybody else to criticize or react to in ways that you're not expecting. But also the most valuable part.
Do you have any tips while we wait for questions? Some of them are going to be working as a group, right? So you obviously have to work with a designer. There might be a developer. Any tips around that, especially when you're going through this iteration process? They might have their own ideas, and how do you push them to kind of say, okay, I understand what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but here's what the numbers are saying, here's what the feedback says. That's a hard thing, like you mentioned that. It's a hard thing for somebody to realize. And you might not see it, somebody else might see it. How do you be open to that? Any tips, any stories you can share with us?
Yeah. So for me, I am an extremely stubborn person, and I have to be very conscious of that. And so whenever I'm debating how a product will work, I always have my alert going on in my brain saying, no, is that okay? Is that okay? Yeah. You have to make compromises. You always have to make compromises. And you have to know that everyone has the same interests, and your ideas aren't always the best ones. So what tends to happen for me is with Hackathon, I had one partner involved, and he is brilliant. He's an excellent coder, but he's also very, very stubborn, more stubborn than I am. And so we obviously came into conflict a fair bit in terms of, okay, which idea should we do? We managed to negotiate it such that we would both pitch, these are the pros, these are the cons for each, and we'd make up lists. After we'd made up those lists, we would each say, okay, this is my preference. And frequently, one person would end up siding with the other person, and everything would be good. And be like, okay, yeah, they're about the same. Or there would be other times when you're like, yeah, I feel like mine's better. But at the same time, you have to remove yourself and look at it from the user's perspective. what will they think? And if you have a user on hand, obviously you say, hey, come decide for us. But otherwise, you have to say to yourself, okay, does it make a huge difference? If it does, then stick to your guns. If it doesn't, then say, okay, you take this one. And then the next time the decision comes around, you negotiate it so that, okay, yeah, this time my idea might end up coming first. Because a lot of the time it's hard to make those decisions, and maybe neither one is right. Maybe you have to come up with a new idea, and you just have to negotiate those team dynamics to go quickly so that you can fail as quickly as possible, get it into the hands of users, and then fix it with your prototyping or with the beta product.
Awesome. Any more questions? We have about 9 more minutes left. So you mentioned React for web. Any advice on mobile? Have you guys built anything?
Mobile, I've done a little bit of a number of different things. One of the first things I did, I tried a little bit on Android, then I switched to an iPhone, sorry world, and I started using Swift. And I actually really enjoyed working with the storyboards when I started, because you can visualize all of the pieces right in front of you. It's like you have your wireframes and you just create your wireframes, and then bam, you can just hook it up to your code and go. But the downside of that was that it takes a really long, well, back when I was developing, it took a really long time to make that turnaround from, okay, this is what I see visually, and then this is what actually happens, because it takes a while to compile. And the other thing was that it wasn't what you see is what you get. It would be, okay, it looks this way when I look at it on the storyboard, but when it's on the device, it never actually works out. So recently I started playing around with Figma. No, not Figma, sorry, Flutter. Okay. Flutter. Oh, I have a shirt somewhere in there. It's awesome. It's a cross-platform development framework for iOS, Android, and in beta, I believe, is the web version. And is really cool if you've used React, because it's a similar way of doing things, a similar way of setting things up. You essentially have to get your head around the concept of everything is a widget. Everything is a box that you put more boxes into. And it ends up being a really convenient way of developing, because you're like, okay, I'm just going to make this really pretty box and put all these boxes inside of it. And then from there, it has a hot reload feature so that you compile it once and it automatically reloads every time you change it. First time I saw that was at the DSC summit last August, and it blew my mind.
It's funny when you said back in the day when I was a developer, I'm like, yeah, you're like what, 2 years ago? And then I should be like an ancient fossil compared to that. One other thing I noticed with the evolution of all these prototyping tools, like we started off with, let's say, Photoshop, and then looking at themes, and then eventually going into web frameworks, is that all these prototyping tools are getting so strong that it becomes very close to a developer tool. So even when you look at Firebase or Flutter, everybody thought it as a prototyping tool. Now it has evolved to become an actual developer tool where you can make modifications, you can scale, you can have all this complexity. So investing some time into understanding the fundamentals with some of these tools, I think it's time worth spent. We are all creative creatures. We all, when we were in grade 1, 2, we ended up learning how to draw as a kid. And those same concepts are intuitively available to us that we can use. It doesn't matter whether you're technical or not. That's why I'm making that comment there. If you can have some time to invest into it, that's another way of communicating. That's another way of expressing your ideas. It's time well spent. Shameless plug. Every Saturday we do a session on mobile development. I'll put the link on the chat. You guys are welcome to join. It starts around 1:30, goes till 3:30. We built 4 apps already live. So if you're ever interested, join us. And now we're gonna start a Flutter series after that, and a web series after that, and continue doing it. Any other questions from the audience? Don't be shy.
Hey, Graham, I'm really sorry. I know I've been taking up a lot of your time, but I just wanted to touch on one last thing, but before you have to go. But so I'm a front-end developer by trade, which you think would make me really good at design, but I'm actually not. So it's like, I guess really, like, I know how to like make the code for stuff. So like if you gave me like a picture of something, I'd be like, yeah, I can code that and I can give that to you, like, within a couple of hours. But I think it's just really hard for me to I guess have that sense of design and like even knowing what looks I guess nice, I guess. Because I mean, even if I were to look at my wireframe right now, which I'm looking at, I can't even say that it looks like like a web page almost. It looks kind of more like a Word document, and I'm just trying to figure out ways on how to make it like look more, I guess, sleek and more cool, I guess, and more appealing to the eye. But I guess I'm just not able to like figure out what elements or like what the layout needs to be. So do you have any tips or like ways to like learn, I guess, design layout for web pages?
That's a very good question. For me, when I first started out, I farted around and made terrible websites for such a long time. I made my personal website when I was in grade 8. I redesigned it for grade 10. I redesigned it for grade 12. I redesigned it in my second year of university. And then I redesigned it this past summer. So it's gone through so many iterations. And at the beginning, it was terrible. It just took time to figure out what looks good. I do find now there's 2 things that have helped me. One thing is having a set of predefined components that make things easier to start. That like Material UI, having that is really useful, because then you can just be like, oh, I want something sort of like that. You pull those things in together and you make your prototype, and it sort of just works pretty quickly. The other thing that I constantly do is I refer to other people's sites. So for my personal website, I had a few people who I said, man, that website is amazing. I want my website to look like that. And using a few of the things that I liked about that in my own wireframes. When I make my wireframes too, there's one thing that I always used to be afraid of, padding and white space. White space was something for me that I didn't really understand. I didn't understand how to use it and how to use it effectively. And over time, I've gotten so much better. And that's something that, yeah, you just spend a lot of time messing around, and a lot of the time it's terrible at first, and you just have to keep on trying. There's also graphic design courses and design courses in general that might be able to help, although I've never actually tried one myself.
Sure.
No problem. Medusa's shamelessly promoting the awesomeness of totv.me. Oh,
So
good spot.
So what we ended up doing was we were in the middle of building this platform, and when you click that, it goes to our Eventbrite page with all the DSC events that are listed. So we do have our Android event coming up on Saturday. So welcome to join. Bring any questions you have. I think we are up. Time's up for us. First of all, thank you so much, Graham. I know you're busy. You're working, and you are expected to go to school soon. Thank you so much for taking the time. Go enjoy the beautiful weather in PEI and the beautiful bubble you guys are in. I know you're not affected by COVID as we are here in Ontario. Go enjoy that. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to get you back on. I know we have a few other series that they're planning to do together. Welcome to send any questions via the DMZ team. This is for the students, and I'll try to coordinate and get some of the answers that you want. Any other topic ideas that you have, welcome to share that as well. Yeah, somebody wants to do a pitch session with you. I think, yeah, I can find a few others, and we should do that for sure. That being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great afternoon. And I want to hand it over to the DMZ team for any final comments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Graham and Medusa, for coming to talk to us.